Hello, I'm Dr. Brian Carr, and I'm running for Member-at-Large for the Lubbock Independent School District. I'm doing a series of short vignettes because I want to give people a chance to find out more about me. I recognize that it may not always be possible for people to come out in public for neighborhood watches, for associations, etc. So I wanted to make these available online so that you can find out more about me and why I believe that I'm the better candidate for the school board. So I think one of the first issues that we have to establish is basically we start from a premise of we've got to find some money. Now, part of this is because a lot of the issues that we describe have to do with the solutions that will involve money. And so we know, for example, that of the approximate 2,000 teachers in Lubbock Independent School District, that the average median salary for a teacher is about $10,000 less than for the state average. Now, what does this do? Well, it means that in the recent TEA survey where they asked members about whether or not they were thinking about leaving the profession, an astonishing 60% of teachers across Texas said that they were considering going into some other field or just retiring because it's just so difficult. So I think my first pledge is to say that if I get onto the school board, we're going to look at that issue and find out how can we not only reimburse teachers and improve their salaries, but also I think indirect costs and benefits, not only for teachers but even retired teachers, so that we can recognize and support the importance of education in our schools. So how can we do this? Because it boils down to the financial part of it. Well, I think all the candidates are talking about, well, we need to go through the fine-tooth comb and look at projects and squeeze out programs that don't seem to be bringing much of a return. I think that's good. That's something that we do need to look at, and I again would pledge to be active in looking at that bottom line and saying how are we going to pay for these programs. However, I think that we also have to look at the fact that Texas will never have an income tax, and so property taxes are really the only way that we have to fund our municipalities and our schools. So with that in mind, I think that we've got to increase our lobbying effort down in Austin and Washington, because while our politicians in Austin may celebrate and slap themselves each on the back for when they say that they put a cap on assessments, the trouble is then we just don't have the money. So I think that we have to look for other revenue sources and other ways to improve the situation for our teachers. I think one example of an indirect cost is health insurance. I was talking recently with a couple that they're both teachers, and they told me that the birth of their daughter, while a great celebration, also resulted in about a $15,000 bill that they had to come up with out of their own funds. So I think one thing we can look at is that when you've got a block of teachers that represent a large demographic, that we ought to be able to go to the insurance carrier and very assertively look at and say we need better copays, we need reduced deductibles, we need better coverage. And I think that, again, if we can attract someone to say I'm going to stay as a teacher because my insurance is pretty good, I think that's one way to attract. I think another one internal, before we ever look at other additional funding, is to say, yes, we need to go through and look at our spending programs, look at how we, the things that we're doing and where do we put our money. And I think that that's going to be one where I believe that what we want to do is meet individually with not only the administration and leadership of the district, but just talk with the stakeholders. I want to know what teachers have to say, and so I pledge to be available and to be receptive to your being able to tell me what you think. And I think when we get into direct costs, now we're back to the reality of how do we pay for things? Well, I think, again, part of why I believe myself to be a better candidate is that I'm ready set from day one to go out and really work to find the finances that we need. I spent 30 years plus as working down on occasion lobbying for certain efforts down in Austin, writing leadership both at the state and the federal level, and letting them know that we're watching and that we want to hold them accountable, so that as money comes available that we make sure that we get a part of that. Now, I think we can look and say, well, what are some new revenue sources? And some consideration, I think, should be given to what we see happening just to the west of us in New Mexico. That they recently changed a law that brought in a whole new revenue source that is one that they desperately needed, and now they've got some additional funds. And so I think it's very likely that such laws may pass in Texas in the near future. And so now is the time to get in line and to partner with, for example, the school district, to join with the Chamber of Commerce, to join the Lubbock Business Alliance, to talk with local banks and other entities, to make sure that Austin doesn't forget about the fact that there actually is a Texas that's west of Abilene, and not to just give us the scraps from the table, but to be one of the main stakeholders. And so I pledge that internal, we will look at the money and how we're spending it, but really just as important is we have to look external and come up with ideas of how we're going to pay for things. So I believe in this instance you would describe me as a fiscal conservative who is going to demand accountability and have transparency. So I hope that you will give that consideration. And as you have questions, that you can reach out to me and call me. My number is 806-795-3911. I want to hear from you about what you think about keeping our property taxes down, maybe even reducing our property taxes, because we need to have better schools, but we have to find the money for it. Thank you, and we'll talk again.